Hey, what's going on, y'all? This is Mr. Murphy, aka Carlito, Panama. Hey, so I got a short film that I had directed and I had wrote as well too as the author. So this is about Mr. Murphy's adventures of welding technology. You could look it up in my bio, things like that. Um, this is basically about uh, a couple of my students who went through a hard time on the street and they end up becoming, resilient, being leaders in the global market in this business, this technology business. So enjoy. Uh, it's a short film, and hit me up in my bio, see if you like it or not. All right, later.
The city was a jungle. Buildings scraped the sky, casting long shadows over the streets. Down below, life was hard. Lorenzo Rez Ramirez knew this jungle well.
Sighs. I'm tired. Tired of the drugs, the violence, the constant fear that gnawed at my gut. I've lost too many friends to this concrete jungle. I don't want to be another casualty.
A siren wailed in the distance, cutting through Rez's thoughts. He looked up, drawn to the flashing red and blue lights. Another night, another bust.
Reflecting Juan, my best friend, gunned down in a drive-by. I promised myself then that I would escape this life.
The flyer in his pocket was a reminder of a different path. Mr. Murphy's Welding College.
Hopeful. For the first time in a long time, I feel a flicker of hope. Maybe there's a way out of this concrete jungle. Maybe I can build something better.
The flyer was crumpled, worn thin from being folded countless times.
Thoughtful Mr. Murphy, a man who believes in second chances.
Rez had always been good with his hands. He could take apart a car engine and put it back together blindfolded.
Determined, welding feels like creating something from nothing. The flyer is a promise, a way out. But it's also a challenge. Can I really leave my old life behind? Can I escape the pull of the streets?
The morning sun felt harsh as Rez stood across from Mr. Murphy's Welding College.
Nervous, I see men, some younger, some older, all with a certain hardness. We're all here for a reason.
He clutched the flyer tighter, feeling the heat of the welding torch in his mind. This was his chance to break the cycle.
With resolve, one step at a time.
He crossed the street, the distance shrinking with each stride. The air inside the welding school was thick with the scent of metal and sweat.
The room was filled with men, all shapes and sizes. They were all strangers, yet I felt a kinship with them.
He felt a hand on his shoulder, a firm but gentle squeeze.
Welcome, son. You've taken the first step.
Rez nodded, unable to speak past the lump in his throat. He followed Mr. Murphy into the heart of the workshop. The sound of clanging metal and the hiss of welding torches was a symphony of hope. For the first time in a long time, he didn't feel alone. Mr. Murphy placed a welding torch in Rez's hand. It was heavier than he expected, cold metal pressing against his palm.
Mr. Murphy demonstrated the proper technique. Sparks flew, a shower of molten light.
He took a deep breath, trying to quell the tremor in his arm. This was the fear of failure, of not living up to his potential.
Your turn, son.
Mr. Murphy's voice was firm but encouraging.
I can do this.
He felt a surge of determination. The first touch of the torch to the metal sent a jolt of heat through Rez's arm.
I could feel Mr. Murphy's presence beside me.
As he worked, a sense of calm settled over him. The world outside the welding school seemed to fade away. All that remained was the metal, the torch, the heat, and the steady beat of his own heart. He lost track of time, hours melting away. He wasn't just welding metal, he was welding together the broken fragments of his life. He was forging a new path with each spark. The welding school became Rez's sanctuary.
I discovered a talent I hadn't known I possessed.
He excelled in his classes, his natural aptitude bolstered by determination. He started sketching his own designs.
Each design, each weld, was a step closer to the light of a future I was starting to believe in. I was building more than just metal objects. I was building hope.
The welding torch sputtered and died, plunging Rez into sudden darkness.
It was always there, lurking just beneath the surface. The past.
It haunted his dreams, transforming familiar faces into grotesque masks. He closed his eyes, willing the images away.
I had sworn I would never go back.
But some nights, the pull of the past was too strong. The memories too vivid, the pain too raw. He would have to find a way to weld his pain into purpose. It was a night like any other.
Juan, always the life of the party, had his arm slung around a girl I didn't recognize.
A car, its headlights off, cruised slowly down the street.
Heads up,
He muttered, his voice barely audible. He didn't need to say more. The others knew. They had lived this script too many times before. Gunfire erupted, shattering the night.
Juan!
Rez hit the pavement, the stench of gunpowder filling his nostrils. He saw Juan lying motionless on the asphalt.
Hold on, man, hold on.
He cradled Juan's head in his lap, his hands slick with blood.
Get out. Don't end up like me.
Rez made a promise that night. The welding mask felt heavy on Rez's face.
I will escape the streets. I will make something of my life.
He picked up the welding torch, the metal cold against his skin. This time, the coldness steeled his resolve. He would carry the memory of that night with him, not as a burden, but as a source of strength. He would weld his pain into purpose, his grief into hope. He would live a life worthy of the sacrifice that had been made. Mr. Murphy saw something in Rez, a spark of potential.
Welding, it ain't just about melting metal together, it's about melting away your doubts, your fears.
Rez began to see the wisdom in Mr. Murphy's words. He started to see the welding torch as an extension of himself. He spent hours in the workshop, the rhythmic hiss of the welding arc soothing his troubled mind. The metal began to bend to his will.
I can do this.
He was transforming under his skilled touch. As Rez's welding skills grew, so did his confidence.
I started to see the world differently, noticing the intricate metalwork that surrounded me.
His fellow students began to warm to him, recognizing a kindred spirit. They shared stories, offered encouragement, and forged a bond of camaraderie. The welding school became a crucible.
I was melting away my past and forging a new future.
One weld, one spark, one project at a time. The streets, however, had a long memory. Just when Rez thought he'd escaped their grasp, they reached out with seductive whispers, tempting him back into the darkness. One night, as he walked home from the welding school, his backpack slung over his shoulder, his mind filled with designs for his latest project, two figures emerged from the shadows.
I recognized them instantly, their faces etched in my memory. They were from my old crew, their eyes cold and hard, their postures radiating a barely contained menace. I felt a familiar chill crawl down my spine, the instinctive fear that had become as much a part of me as my own heartbeat.
Yo, Rez, heard you been going straight, getting soft.
Rez met their gaze, his jaw clenched, his hands balled into fists inside his pockets. He could smell the stale scent of cigarettes and cheap beer on their breath, a pungent reminder of a life he was trying to leave behind.
I'm done with that life. I'm done with you.
The gang members exchanged a look, a silent communication that spoke volumes. They had expected him to cower, to back down, but Rez, emboldened by his newfound purpose, stood his ground.
You think you're better than us, Rez?
The second gang member taunted, stepping closer.
I'm not better than anyone. I'm just trying to be better than I was.
but he refused to be intimidated. "Walk away. I'm not going back to that life." He could see the surprise in their eyes. They had underestimated him. He had found his strength, his purpose. He had found it in himself. The air crackled with tension. Rez stood his ground, his heart pounding against his ribs. His gaze locked on the two figures before him. He knew walking away from his old life wouldn't be easy. The streets had a way of holding on tight, demanding a price for even the thought of escape.
You think this is a game, Rez? You turn your back on your crew, there are consequences.
Rez knew they meant business. He'd seen their brand of justice before, swift and brutal, leaving scars both physical and emotional. He could feel the fear clawing at his throat, threatening to choke him. But he pushed it down, refusing to give them the satisfaction of seeing him break. He thought of Mr. Murphy, his gruff encouragement echoing in his ears.
You're building something stronger, son. Don't let anyone tell you different.
"You're either with us," the second gang member hissed, his hand still hovering near his waistband, "or you're against us. There's no in-between." Rez knew they were trying to back him into a corner, to force him to choose between the life he was building and the one they represented. He thought of Juan, his laughter echoing in his memory, his blood staining the asphalt. He thought of the promise he had made that night, the vow to escape the cycle of violence that had claimed his friend. He looked from one hardened face to the other, seeing the years of anger, the desperation, the hopelessness etched into their features. They were trapped, bound by the chains of their past, just as he had been.
I'm not against you, but I'm not with you either. I'm done being defined by this neighborhood, by this life. I'm choosing a different path.
His words hung in the air, a challenge, a declaration of independence. The gang members stared at him, their expressions unreadable. For a moment, the only sound was the distant wail of a siren, a familiar soundtrack to their lives. Then, slowly, almost imperceptibly, the tension seemed to ease.
You think you're the first one who's tried to walk away, Rez? This life, it ain't that easy to escape.
The first gang member chuckled, a humorless sound that sent a shiver down Rez's spine. He turned and walked away, his steps firm and resolute. He didn't look back. He could feel their eyes on his back, but he refused to give them the satisfaction of seeing him hesitate. He had made his choice. He was free. S1. Media. Man feeling liberated. Man in an urban setting looking hopeful. Man experiencing freedom. Maybe not. But I'm not going to let it control me anymore. I'm forging my own path. The sun, a fiery orb rising above the city skyline, seemed to burn brighter than ever before. Rez stood on the steps of Mr. Murphy's Welding College, his welding certificate clutched tightly in his hand. It was a passport, a symbol of his hard-won freedom. He thought of the hours he'd spent inside those walls, the sweat, the frustration, but mostly, he remembered the pride he felt with each successful weld. He was leaving that life behind, stepping into a future filled with possibilities. He caught his reflection in the glass door of the welding school, barely recognizing the man staring back at him. Gone was the haunted look in his eyes, the fear that had clung to him like a second skin. In its place, he saw a quiet confidence, a newfound strength that emanated from deep within. He was still Rez, marked by the streets that had shaped him, but he was no longer defined by them. He was a welder, an artist, a creator. He held the power to build, to shape, to transform. He was no longer running from his past. He was running towards his future. He thought of Juan, his laughter echoing in his memory.
Don't end up like me.
Juan had whispered, his voice weak but urgent. Rez had kept his promise. He had escaped the streets, but not before they had etched their lessons onto his soul. He would carry those lessons with him, a reminder of the fragility of life, the importance of choosing a different path, the power of hope in the face of despair. As he walked away from the welding school, Rez couldn't shake the feeling that he was leaving a part of himself behind. But he knew that wasn't entirely true. The welding school, Mr. Murphy, his fellow students, they had all become a part of his story. He thought of the metal sculpture he had created, a towering figure breaking free from chains. It was a symbol of his own journey, of overcoming adversity. He knew his journey was far from over. The streets still held their allure, promising an easier path. But Rez had glimpsed a different kind of beauty, a different kind of strength. He had found it in the heat of the welding torch, in the creative spark that ignited his soul. He would carry that spark with him, a beacon of hope for himself and others, a life forged in the fires of adversity, illuminated by the sparks of redemption.